is going to moderate that for us. Dr. Berger is the owner of Wholistic ReLeaf and has spoken in the past at this conference. And graciously decided to help us out by moderating this session, as well as he is also going to replace Dr. Rosado, who was unable to make it. So he's got a presentation to replace that. Dr. Berger, now yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I hope you guys had a good night and are enjoying the conference. It's great to be around colleagues, you know, it's of like mine. So it's just really wonderful to be able to get this together. Thank you, Jean, for putting this together. Our first speaker today is Dr. Deepa Verma, and she'll be talking about the benefits of CBD and on gut health.
Operated if I'm dead.
Good morning, everyone. So I just drove in actually from Clearwater, Tampa. So good drive. High forest things. I have 2 medical practices. I started my practice Synergistic Integrative, called Synergistic Wellness now. It's a multifunctional integrative. I'm a double board certified integrative anti-aging MD, and some other platforms. But I've had my practice for 10 years. I started it 10 years ago, and I'm a traditionally trained family physician. And I started my practice just out of challenges in my life. I was going through a divorce at the time, my 3 young boys. They're all teens now and just going off to college. And my dad had passed away, unfortunately, from traditional medicine stuff. And it was just a time for me to really find myself again. I'm very spiritual, and I just really believe in holistic healing. I live my life that way. I'm of Eastern Indian origin. I'm first generation. I was born in Queens, New York, and did my med school, everything up to my med school and residency in Jersey. Came down to Florida, Miami, because my ex-husband had to finish his interventional radiology fellowship, and that's how we came there. And then just Miami was a little bit much, so we decided to settle over in the Clearwater area, so I've been there since 2007. So like I said, I have 3 teen boys. One's off to college this year. The other 2 in the next 2 to 3 years, they'll all be off to college. So I started the practice, and I do everything. I do everything from just your medical consults, gut health, hormones, weight loss, detox. I do a lot of IV therapy. I started doing medical marijuana when that law passed, so I've been doing it for quite a while. I've always believed in CBD. As you're going to see on my slide, I'm just going to look at the history. I'm going to kind of go a little faster in the beginning because obviously my topic is gut health. So I always like to give the history because I feel like a lot of people don't really know, and you guys do, but it's so nice to educate people because they really don't know the history too much about CBD. So the learning objectives are to demonstrate the intricate gut-brain connection, we call it the neural-enteric connection, and the DCS, which is the endocannabinoid system, which is really surprising to a lot of people. People don't realize we have an innate receptor system. I know it wasn't discovered too long ago. The work was done by a researcher out of Israel, but obviously it's been there. It's very primitive. They found it in primitive sea sponges. It's been there. It sits in animals. So that's a big key to why we do so well with CBD. I'm going to talk about how it can play therapeutic roles in gut disease related processes and educate this through scientific work. I have all the references in there. So I'm always very strict about wherever I get my facts to make sure, because we have to support that. So gut health is huge. These days, all we hear about is gut health. I'm a plant-based physician. I do encourage my patients to be plant-based and pesca plant-based, but by no means do I'm telling people to give up what they really enjoy. I'm just telling them to be more anti-inflammatory. Gut health is huge. Our gut's our second brain. If you actually look at the gut, it does resemble the brain. They've actually found relationships to diseases like Parkinson's disease that originate in the gut. The proteins they've said we've had appendectomies, for example, have higher risks of having Parkinson's disease. A lot of neurodegenerative diseases do originate with that, which is fascinating to think. I love this quote. It just talks about how our mind and how it enables us to take a different perspective from high up to see and evaluate our own lives and the lives of others in a privileged way. Maybe this euphoric and elevating feeling of the ability to step outside the box and to look at life's patterns from this high perspective is the inspiration for the term high itself. So I love that quote because a lot of times we use words and we don't really understand the history of it. And I think there's a lot of history. We can date back to thousands of years ago, the medicinal therapeutic use of cannabis in India and China. In fact, one of our gods in Hinduism, Shiva, is shown to be with the marijuana leaf, the one who has a third eye. He's the god of destruction. And it's just, this is how ancient it is. It's been used for so long. And one of the receptors that we have, the cannabis receptors, for the chemical compound is called anandamide. And ananda in Sanskrit means bliss. So when we look at those terms, there's a huge history behind it as well. It made its way over to the east. It went to the Middle East. Obviously, the terms like hashish, those are familiar. Bhang, that's from Banga, which is one of the Sanskrit terms. As it made its way to Europe, we see that it got the European influence. So Linnaeus finally gave its name. That's where we get the name cannabis. Finally came to America. America, as you know, Western world is it's so new. Our Western medicine is so new. We actually had flourishing plantations in 1800. What really changed was in the early 1900s with the onset of the pharmaceutical companies and also the Mexican immigration. That really took a turn, unfortunately, when that happened, because now it was looked upon negatively. And because we were so kind of xenophobic and anti-immigration, we labeled marijuana as a drug at that point. And there was a lot of false notions surrounding marijuana that it made people violent, that it caused people to act in different ways. When we really know, and especially during the hippie era, it's such a peace-loving, it makes you calm. We have that stoned effect. Nobody gets violent on it. Nobody in the history of the world has died from an overdose of marijuana because we have receptors. And it's just, you can't do that. I mean, you can have negative side effects for sure, and we'll talk about that later. Of course, if you have too much THC, for example, you can get psychoactive, you can get nauseous, you can vomit. So you can actually reverse those side effects of THC by taking more CBD. Then, as you can see, we have, with the era and certain presidents, we have the Controlled Substance Act, unfortunately, which changed a lot because marijuana got placed on that, which obviously I don't agree with. But when you're looking at the plant, classifying with recreational drugs, that's just, a dishonor to label marijuana that way. So the formal scientific name, this I thought was interesting. Again, I love giving little tidbits and facts, but you can actually just see all these different names that we actually call marijuana and how it originated in different parts of the world. So I thought that was interesting. Even simple things like pot, and how these different words came about. Hemp and marijuana are two varieties of cannabis for different purposes. So when people say cannabis, we often refer to marijuana. And we don't realize that we're often referring to hemp plants as well. So just think of it like squares and rectangles. A square is a type of rectangle with 4 sides of the same length. And all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares. So you kind of look at it that way. So hemp is a variety of cannabis with low THC levels. So when we talk about the legalization, when we're talking about medical marijuana, it's the cutoff rate less than 0.3% or more than 0.3%. And when you have a higher level of THC, that's when we refer to it as medical marijuana. And when we go into the system to put orders in the MFOR, we have the low THC and the medical to have different. And then of course you have the smokable route as well too. But this is just a good illustration to show that cannabis, marijuana, hemp, and that's the difference here. So high THC for marijuana and low THC. And the THC part is what causes the psychoactive part. Also, that THC is what gives you the munchies. So, we often think of like college students, right? When they're smoking pot, they're doing freshman 15 or whatever. But high THC is going to be important in certain patient population groups, especially those who have cancer, who have cachexia, who can't really eat. We do want to stimulate some of their appetite, but that's going to be helpful for them. We have to be able to counsel the patients and let them know what are the side effects. So let's talk about CBD versus THC. So they both obviously interact with the ECS. There's going to be different receptors and how they're modulated. We have like CB1 and CB2. So they have the same exact molecular structure. It's just the thing about biochemistry is just the difference in arrangement of the atoms there. So we have the carbons, the hydrogens, the oxygen. So CBD is non-psychoactive, obviously. That THC activates both CB1 and CB2 receptors, while CBD is indirectly modulates CB1 and CB2. CBD can increase our level of our own endocannabinoids. And I'll mention that a little later in some ways that we can increase our own endogenous cannabinoids. For example, omega person. So I always check omega levels on my lab work. I do very in-depth labs. If I always tell people if their omega level is low, not only is it going to have inflammatory effects, it's very anti-inflammatory, it helps keep the blood thin, keep the brain and heart health. It's also important for mood. Sometimes people will say take omega for mood, and when I started doing that research, then I really realized because it's a precursor to some of the formation of our endocannabinoids, which is key. So I like this slide as well too, because you can actually see the different cannabinoids. So there are, when we look at the different cannabinoids, they're going to be important. I'm gonna have some slides later. They're pretty detailed. So if I go fast, I think you guys will have a copy of it, so you can actually look at it. But you have the raw, then you can dry it and heat it, and you can actually see here the different types that you can get from these processes, and then you can age it, and then you get from the conditioning. Actually see the delta 8 form of the THC. That's when the aged version. I just like to highlight some important ones. There's more and more research being done. There's new ones coming out. I just picked my top 5. So you have this top 5 here. There's a lot of research coming out with CBN, CBG, especially in sleep, mood, neurodegenerative diseases. So THC delivers that high stony effect. That's what we call that psychoactive effect. And it's activated and needed from that THCV, that's that compound. The compound then binds the cannabinoid receptors, producing that common high, which is also synonymous with what we call that runner's high. So most modern strains range anywhere from 10 to 30% in THC. 15 to 20% is your industry standard, but some strains check in as low as 5%. So that's where all the testing comes in. And, a lot of my patients might say, oh my gosh, is it okay? I'm going to have a urine drug test. This THC, even when they're just getting hemp, because I sell CBD in my practice, medical grade CBD, and say THC free or full spectrum. So a lot of patients will get worried when they're doing the urine drug test. So you just have to really counsel them, make sure. I only use medical grade, pharmaceutical grade, physician regulated nutraceuticals, all my products. I don't recommend anyone getting them over the counter or off the internet because there's no FDA regulation. You don't really know what's in it. So CBD, that we call the seizure stopper and the sorcerer's stone of the cannabis sphere. CBD is pure medicine. CBD has a wide range of proven medical effects. We've often heard about how these children who experience multiple seizures a day go to having this fuel weed. So CBD is highly, highly important in the neurological functioning. The compound has been featured on CNN, and the oils are legal. Probably more now. I think this slide might be a little dated. I apologize. Some strains of hemp with almost zero trace of THC within are very rich in CBD. So remember, you have your CBD, just about cannabis, you have your CBD rich and the THC rich ones. So strains on the lower spectrum of CBD percentages are often overshadowed by the THC. So when people go to dispensary, I will tell them, make sure you look at the ratio of your CBD to THC to be 1:1, 10:1. I used to do a cannabis DNA test. That company is no longer there, and I'm trying to find a good genetic company that does it. But all my medical marijuana or cannabis patients did that, and then actually looked at their genetics in terms of how they would respond to CBD, THC, how they would respond to it if they had a more genetic predisposition for increased appetite or what pain threshold was. I really love that test, but unfortunately, I don't have it anymore. Considered for THCV, so when we're talking about the top 5 cannabinoids, this is called the caffeine of cannabis. It's a racy instant jolt that kind of runs through the body. It's meaning the sativa strain. So we talk about the strains too. We have sativa and we have indica. So I keep it simple for my patients. I tell them that you use sativa more during the daytime. It helps with creativity and focus. And indica is good for more calming, more sleep. And a lot of people will use that for even the nighttime. So THCV is psychoactive and carries that trippy, that kind of elated, blissful effect. It has to reach a very high temperature at 428 degrees to get activated. And also, they've seen some stimulation in bone growth and also with diabetes for helping maintain blood sugar levels. So if you want a high energy strain, then you want to look for ones that have the THCV dispensary. Likewise, if you get anxious and prefer indicas, then you might want to steer clear of this. Some people will have oxymoronic effects. I never did marijuana when I was in college or anything, and really I got into it obviously and started prescribing it. And I remember taking one strain, the indica strain, and it actually had the opposite effect. It actually made me feel a little paranoid and anxious too. So when patients are telling you what they're feeling, you can't just dismiss it. It's like telling them, "Oh, your numbers are okay, but you're fine," when they're still not feeling well. Everyone's going to have a different effect, so you just make sure you listen to the patient. You can't just say like, "Oh, indica is calming," like that. It can't be like you're feeling awake or anything like that. You have to validate what they're feeling, but for the most part, it's either during the daytime, indica at nighttime. CBN, there's a lot more research I've been seeing lately on CBN. And think of CBN as your CBD light. So CBN is thought to share characteristics and benefits of CBD, mainly as sleep aid. It's very calming, and they're actually doing some research with topical to help treat MRSA. Since CBN is converted from THC, there are some trace amounts as well. But when present, CBN values tend to appreciate over time as a longer cannabis amount. So CBN, the more CBN is likely to produce. So thanks to modern extraction methods, scientists are now discovering how to isolate CBN, making it the healthy sleep aid of the future. So CBN, think of more of the sleep benefits. CBG, this is another one I've been reading a lot about recently. This is a powerful potential as a recent discovery to help with, that's apparent with both THC and CBD compounds. So that means we wouldn't have THC and CBD without CBG, which eventually turns into those compounds. This also, like CBN, has relaxing effect, benefit. It's coined the stem cells for all other cannabis. CBG functions by blocking GABA and relaxing muscles. So I do a lot of neurotransmitter testing in my practice. So I look at GABA and dopamine and serotonin. Just remember, when I say the second brain, that that truly is the second brain. So when I look at mood disorders, I see a lot of children in my practice, teens. I do a lot of mental health counseling. A lot of them have mood disorders, and it's by virtue of just the age we live in. Social media, the technology. I mean, I know when my boys were born in the early 2000s, the 2000s, I mean, they just were born into the era of iPads. I mean, and by some of my fault too, it's just like, to keep them busy. There's some high chair, you give them an iPad to keep them busy, but their brain is constantly stimulated. There's a lot going on there. So I do a lot of neurotransmitter testing. Over 85% of our serotonin is produced in our gut, and same with dopamine. So when we're talking about mood disorders, I look at gut health. I do a lot of gut health testing, food sensitivity testing. I talk about diet, and then I use the other modalities as well. I do a lot of neurotransmitters and replete that, because by just giving someone like a Zoloft or Prozac, you're not going to help their neurotransmitters if their gut health is compromised. The endocannabinoid system, I'll refer to as ECS, is a fundamental regulatory system. It existed before the brain. Obviously, it's been named after research with cannabis. That's what we call endocannabinoid. First identified, as I mentioned before, in the late 1980s. It's composed of a host of neurotransmitters and receptors. And that's why cannabis works so well. We reproduce our own endogenous cannabinoids. That's the term endocannabinoid. And so some examples are anandamide and then 2-AG. So these are ones that are inherently, innately found in our body. And a lot of people don't know that. And this is why cannabis works so well, because we have the receptors in the body for mental and physical health. So ECS receptors get stimulated and bound by three types of cannabinoids: endocannabinoids, which we make, the phytocannabinoids, which are the plant sources. So we're talking about the cannabis plant, then of course synthetic cannabinoids, right? We have to have pharmaceutical versions of even natural things. So things like marinol, you've probably heard. Most fundamental physiological system involved in establishing and maintaining our health. Again, physical, mental, and I talk about all types of health with patients: physical, mental, emotional, and sexual health. It can help with so many different things. In each tissue, organ, system, the ECS performs different tasks, but the ultimate goal is homeostasis, balancing. Because that's all our body wants to do is balance. We just go through life abusing it so much by poor lifestyle. I talk about my 4 pillars of health, which are clean diet, exercise, stress reduction, and restorative sleep. And when people can balance those, especially with the aid of taking supplements or cannabis, then they're going to just live a better life. I'm all about longevity. I do a faculty speaker for A4M, and a lot of our recent topics have been on inflammaging and longevity, which it all ties back to so many common threads. So cannabinoids, just to sum it up, CBD and THC, we have the flavonoids, which have a very unique smell and flavor. So flavonoids in cannabis are called cannaflavins. One cannaflavin, like cannaflavin A, is 30 times more effective than aspirin by binding to the PGE, the prostaglandin 2 receptor, to reduce inflammation. 30 times more. That's huge. So when people are abusing things like NSAIDs, the ibuprofen, you can tell them these facts. I mean, it's fascinating. I do a lot of boswellia and those kind of things as well too, because people don't want to take that. NSAIDs cause ulcers, they cause leaky gut, kidney damage. So we want to make sure that we're really educating the patient about why we want to do that. I'm going to go a little quicker because I don't have much time here. Just some good slides here. Again, always keep in mind that we have these 2 receptors, CB1 and CB2. And this slide I love too, because you can actually see the distribution. So CB1 is mainly centered in the CNS, so you have your brain and your spinal cord, while the CB2 receptors are more in the peripheral system. So this kind of now really touches upon the gut. So we have so many things that happen to us on many, many levels: brain, skin, thyroid, colon. Again, as an integrative physician, I'm looking at all these things and doing so much in-depth lab work, and it all, ties into inflammation. Inflammation is the root cause of all evil, and CBD, as we know it, is very, very anti-inflammatory. So inflammation, what I was just talking about, you can see here how many things this causes, again, on physical, mental levels. When I talk about skin health as well, I mean, you can do topical. I have people with arthritis and autoimmune disease, do topical, do internal, whatever. They really do find relief. I've had people who literally within a week said, oh my God, that CBD roll-on that you gave me was amazing. So cannabis, again, the 3 forms that we have here, but they all bind to your receptors. So remember, CB1 and CB2. So the gut-brain connection, we look at inflammation, immunity, emotional states. Physical sign, you can have muscle spasm, headaches, insomnia, tremors, you can have skin issues, behavioral changes, and remember mental health issues and emotional issues as well too. So things like ADD, poor focus, which now we're just so quick to give prescriptions for Adderall. So I'm just going to skip the slide. This is just a little bit more in depth on our state. Our second brain, so you can see how we have so many bacteria. It's about 5 pounds of our body weight is in our gut. We have over 40 acute and chronic GI diseases. It affects Americans on so many levels. I mean, everybody comes in there talking about gut health issues. They feel bloated or constipated. They have IBS. IBS is just a catch-all phrase. I do very in-depth gut health testing as well to look at and diagnose people with all their issues and really go and correct that at the core. So this is just another fact. We have obviously 10-to-1 ratio for bacteria. It's obviously these facts are, the amount that it covers. We can go around the world 2.5 times with the amount of bacteria that we have in our gut. So our gut microbiome is huge. People just take probiotics, and you have to make sure they're taking physician-regulated one. Make sure you explain to them what the importance is of taking probiotics. We have millions and millions of strains in the body. So CBD, we have the CB1 and 2 receptors. So it affects that. As I said, we have a lot of serotonin that gets produced in our gut. CBD inhibits the FAAH, which is an enzyme that metabolizes cannabinoids. So we want to extend the life of the cannabinoids. That's the key there. So this is just an illustration of the receptors in the brain and the gut. So this is what it does at the cellular level. It modulates the mitochondria. It helps to decrease inflammation. And so when we have these endocannabinoid system deficiencies, they're associated with mental and physical state. So when people come to you for that, this is how we can start explaining it to them. And I'm not saying everybody has to be on CBD, but this is a great option because knowing that we have receptors, why not help them and saturate those receptors? So we talked about that COX-2 pathway. Instead of someone reaching for an NSAID or aspirin, you can let them know that this helps as well. I talked about this earlier too. I have a lot of Parkinson's patients. I do a lot of IV therapy, glutathione with them, CBD and peptides. I do a lot of regenerative peptides as well. This is just a little busy slide, but showing kind of where when you have leaky gut, what happened, the layers. All right, this is too busy, but you can see it in the slide. This is all just more scientific research on the activity of the CB receptors. So I apologize for going back like a minute left. Recent review that was done in cannabis and treatment of IBD highlighted the fact that now IBD is different than IBS, inflammatory bowel disease rather than irritable bowel syndrome. IBD is grouped in autoimmune diseases. So think of like colitis, like Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. People with psoriasis, it's different than eczema. When someone tells me they have psoriasis, I automatically know that's an autoimmune disease. Then you think about rosacea, all those other things as well. So the good news is that CBD might just be the answer to decreasing the permeability. So we talk about leaky gut. I test the zonulin levels, which indicate leaky gut. So patients can really get a lot of relief from using CBD products. You can incorporate them with the gut protocol. And this is just more scientific stuff and some sources here. Okay, that's my time. So cannabinoids are capable of suppressing the immune system. So we talk about immunity, reducing inflammation, antioxidants. These are just kind of highlights of what you can tell your patients. Analgesia is huge. Everyone has pain. So this is what I tell my patients because everyone's looking, I always say, create a healthier and happier version of your existence, mental and physical. So we have to understand that gut is important. It is our epicenter for immunity, mental, physical health. These are all the references. Everything's legit here. And if you want to follow me, I do a lot on like Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. I just kind of all the same stuff, but I post, you know, fun videos and little tidbits too, if you just want to learn a little bit more about my practice. That's my website up there as well too. If you just want to check that out. We're located over in Tampa and Clearwater, and over about 40% of my practice are people actually around the country. I have people even internationally. I treat people in other countries as well too. So sorry I had to rush, but thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so we have about 5 minutes for Q&A. So if you can stay up for that. Does anybody have any questions that they would like to pose? I'll be happy to transmit it into the microphone so we get it for the tape. Yes, please. Oh, wait, hold on a second. There's a running mic now, so I don't have to repeat it into the mic. What was it you said you test for leaky gut?
Zonulin. So there's some good, there's one company that I use, GI Map. Zonulin is a good indicator. It tests like pathogens. I test calprotectin, beta-glucuronidase. You can get a lot from that. I've actually predicted some of my women having breast cancer because their beta-glucuronidase was high. That indicates like estrogen dominance and things like that. So yeah, zonulin is really good. There's other companies too, but.
Any other people have questions? Yes, right in the back.
Does the route of administration matter to help the gut? I mean, is it better to do tinctures? I mean, do you have a preferred route of administration for leaky gut?
I do. Oral is the least effective way. That IV therapy is 100%. Obviously, we can't do IV CBD injections. But yes, I do talk about sublingual is great. And I explain to patients, yes, it's going in your mouth, but you're putting it under the tongue. And if you tell everybody to lift up their tongue, they'll see that large vein under there. Sublingual is the best. Topical too. I mean, you're putting it right on the skin. And that is why I'm so big on organic and clean skincare. And even some of the skincare that I use has CBD, but sublingual and topical for sure, because you want to bypass the gut when you're healing the gut.
Hello, I'm an attorney here in Florida. My name is Robert Strickland, and I wanted to know what certifications do the doctors need in order to diagnose or to prescribe CBD to clients, our patients?
So just regular CBD hemp, that's available legally. That's fine. You can carry those products. But in order to get certified, you have to be a physician, MD or DO, and you have to get licensed. So for me, every 2 years when I renew my medical license as an MD, that's the time that I have to renew my medical marijuana license as well. And that is when you are licensed to prescribe and you're in the registry. And when you can prescribe to patients, they're going to be in the registry as well.
Right. But that's for medical marijuana, but I'm talking about for
Oh.
CBD.
No, anybody can because it's legal, right? So basically people can go to a gas station and go buy it, right? But there's medical grade CBD. So that's what I can sell. So it's like me selling vitamins, because who knows what they're putting in there. I mean, I've had people get sick and think that was caustic when they were buying things. Oh, who knows what they mix in there. But yeah, anyone can sell it. You can buy it off the internet. I don't advise it. medical grade. I mean, medical grade. And I tell my patients too, they're like, well, I see your products on the internet, but I'm like, yes, but usually if things are medical grade, when you're buying nutraceuticals, you have to register under me. Because if they're selling it on Amazon and eBay, some third-party vendor, you don't know what they've done with it. So I always tell people, just look for medical grade stuff.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Dr. Verma.
Thank you.
Okay, and I now get to be a speaker for you guys. See, when you're short, you have to kind of angle to see the clock just right, because otherwise you can't see it. Come over here. All right. Well, hello, everybody. I'm David Berger. I am a board certified pediatrician in Tampa, Florida. I have a Holistic Pediatrics and Family Care as my main clinic. Holistic ReLeaf is my medical cannabis clinic, and I've separated that apart just to have two different clinics because the rules are so different in cannabis that we want to have a very clean demarcation between the two. So I'll be talking today. Oh, that's even better. Thank you so much. Cool, appreciate it. Okay, so I will be talking today about in the pediatric space. I've been a holistic pediatrician since back in my days in residency at Tampa General, which was in the mid-90s. Started using herbs back then, how to figure out how to come up with individualized pediatric protocols, because certainly none of that existed. And so using all other forms of supplements, I do functional medicine. And so I really had to figure out my own protocols and to see what would work, taking a low and slow approach. So come 2014 with CBD, 2016 with THC, I know a lot of doctors were very uncomfortable, especially with kids. And for me, well, it was just another herb because I had plenty of experience in trying to figure out what to do. Very different type of herb, of course, but nonetheless, the principles are the same. There we go. Yes. Okay. So, and thank you so much. So I do have some slides that are actually were spoken in the previous lecture. So I'm not going to spend as much time about that. We talked about the CBD versus THC. And just to be clear, the products that are sold as considered hemp derived cannot have more than 0.3%, but in the dispensaries, they're allowed to have up to 0.8% of THC. So that is almost triple, although you will see, and I'll show you later on how certificates of analysis can tell us about smaller amounts there. But that could be a difference. Of course, that could be potential difference even on a drug test like was mentioned before. Okay, and when you hear about the ratios, you'll always hear the CBD number listed first. So of course, a 1-to-1 is even. A 5-to-1 would be 5 parts CBD, 1 part THC. A 1-to-5 would be 1 CBD to 5 THC. Okay, and again, some of the same cannabinoids you heard about, pardon me. One of the things also about THCV is it's actually the higher content that I've seen. It actually can serve as an appetite suppressant the way that caffeine sometimes can as well. So sometimes finding some strains, especially for people and some of my kids who, especially on the spectrum, who don't necessarily have a filter when it comes to eating, sometimes that can be helpful as well. When you talk about the CBGAs, with the acid forms and then converted to see CBGA versus CBG, and that's really derived from the same thing. It's just carboxylated in a different form. I find a lot of benefits using CBG. So to me, CBD is like where I start everything. Okay, and that's true whether it's my adult patients or my pediatric patients. Obviously in the pediatric world, it's a little different because of the concerns about THC and brain development. And so that's something we'll get into a little bit. So I always try to work up the CBD first. I actually suggest and educate my patients about the CBG and about the CBNs and such. And I really kind of see what their needs are. And then I kind of my pediatrics use THC as my last effort if they're needing help. I mean, it works spectacular. The number one side effect of THC in my practice is coming off of other medications. And people will be like, how, THC, you're giving THC for ADD, wouldn't that can make the kid more spacey? And that's kind of where it talks about, yeah, but we start talking about the terpenes and we start talking about the other things because, it's using CBD to counteract the high as we heard about. So yeah, I mean, I have people coming off of Ritalins and Adderalls and we're lowering their doses and all other types of anti-anxiety medicines, depression medicine. So if you know what you're doing and you titrate it up, and part of my philosophy is make one change at a time. Never make multiple changes. It gets way too confusing. I also recommend, because people also come to me because they want to get off of their medicines, either because they aren't into the pharmaceutical thing in the first place, or they have side effects. My recommendation, though, is do not start tapering those other medications until you get optimized on the cannabis products. Because if you're increasing one thing and you're decreasing the other, you kind of don't know what just happened there. So, you know, I talk to every family about keeping a detailed log. What did you know, spreadsheet? What did you take? How much of it on a scale of 1 to 5 for whatever the symptom is? You may find that these symptoms are better, but this one isn't. And so part of our practice, and thank you to Dr. Barry Gordon, who kind of explained how his office was set up, and so we copycatted him with having a full-time patient educator room to answer questions in between. And now, you know, we've learned we could do med management this way. So now when I ask somebody what ails, you know, when someone says, what does cannabis help with? And my answer is kind of like, well, what ails you? You know, and it's kind of like, that's a true thing. But once we kind of get to the basics, and the follow-ups, I'll be, well, what's not working? What's still not helping? What can I help you out more with? And then we kind of start to really fine tune it. This is a much busier slide than what you saw before about this. You can see the CBGA in the middle and how CBGA is kind of like the mother cannabinoid. It's found both in marijuana plants, hemp plants. I'm not going to go over this at all because it was well explained enough, and you can spend a half hour on that slide. Okay. You'll hear people talk about indica plants, specifically, you know, shorter, wide, sativa plants bigger. Nowadays, almost everything that's out there, though, is a hybrid, despite the fact that you get them labeled as such. So one may have much more sativa properties, et cetera. And even amongst the hybrids, if you look at terpene profiles, you can see which ones are more sativa or indica. But realistically speaking, they are actually, all of them are hybrids in the first place. And again, hemp being just a particular type that's been used industrial more, that can have more CBD in it, but doesn't have the THC property. Okay, so autism is the thing that really brought me into the holistic world in the first place. And really started off with the concept of gut health, and families would ask me about testing the microbiome, checking for pathogens like Candida and Clostridia. And that was really how I first started healing people with autism. As you can see here, in terms of cannabis, sativa is actually everything. So this doesn't mean that it's a sativa plant. It's just a genus and species for all of what we're talking about. So again, that's another place where it can get kind of confused. But as you can see here, you know, they had 18 patients with autism, and 15 of them adhered to the treatments. 10 of them did not, were non-epileptic, and 5 did have the diagnosis of epilepsy. There were strong improvements noted for seizures, attention deficit, etc. The 10 non-epileptic patients, 9 of which were present, were presented in improved equal or above in 8 different categories of autism. So seizures can happen in people with autism, especially during the second decade of life. But what we see is almost every type of symptom can improve. Not that every single kid gets better for every single symptom, but they do. And it's really quite remarkable. And even like, you know, I know that for Epidiolex, for instance, being FDA approved for seizures, the doses that they put on there, 2.5 milligrams per kilogram as a starting dose, working up to 10 milligrams, in a BID fashion, I've never needed that kind of dosing in order to see the types of benefits, including stopping seizures or reducing seizures significantly. So I'm glad that the FDA at least tested those high doses and were comfortable putting it out there. I think it gave us a lot of comfort in using higher doses, but I've never needed these types of doses in order to get the benefit, at least in my patient population. Okay, so in this one, in the single institution experience, this is particular into patients, oncology patients. What they were focusing really on was alleviating the side effects. Okay, no one's out there saying this will cure cancer. Nobody should be using this as a replacement for chemotherapy. This is not alternative medicine. This is complementary medicine. But what they found, and they were to palliative care, and they had 50 children, adolescents. They did take up to young adults as well in the study here. And as you can see, what they were really focusing on, like nausea, vomiting, you know, the mood, disturbed sleep, all of those types of things we know can happen. The medication was given to 30 patients, real oil drops. 11 of them did inhale it. But they part of it did smoke it. Obviously that wouldn't have been the children, that would have been the young adults, etc. But also vaporization capsules different ways. And there were positive effects that were reported in 80% of the patients who were using medical marijuana. It was usually well tolerated. There are a few patients reporting toxicity, and I think toxicity is not when we think of toxicity like opioid toxicity or, you know, even SSRI toxicity, but, you know, just negative effects being seen. And of course, we don't want people smoking. As a physician, I don't encourage anybody to burn anything and put it into their lungs, but there's lots of ways to inhale it. I am a big advocate of dry herb vaporizing, and I'll get into that in a little bit too. Okay. Now Delta 8, a lot of controversy going on about that also. But you know, Delta 8, it's another form of THC. It's not considered as intoxicating as Delta 9, but it certainly has intoxicating properties to it. In this particular study, they were using Delta 8 for pediatric oncology patients. And you can see here, they administered, and again, I'm not going to be able to calculate what 18 milligrams per meter squared is. I always found that interesting in medical school, and they would use that because, like, I mean, who the heck can figure that out right there? And then when you're trying to help a patient out, but what they did find, you know, there are kids aged 3 to 13, so these were younger kids. And they were given up to 8 months of it. Vomiting and was completely prevented in this study. And they actually ended this study early because of success. You know, when you hear that, you know, they end the study, so their data was so overwhelming that they didn't feel it was ethical for them to keep going and not publish. So they were able to do the statistical analysis ahead of time. Okay, now in terms of real life experience using autism for autism, this was from Dr. Schneider, going back 4 years, yeah. 188 children, now 81% males in autism, that's normal. There's a 4-to-1 ratio of male to female in the autism world. So that's very much what we see here. Again, median age around 13 years old, but anywhere from about 6 to 20 were done here. But you can see most of the kids were in the middle there, but certainly different ages. Most of them were using sublingual drops, 5% were allowed to use flour. Now, of course, any child, let alone a child with autism, sublingual is a great theory because, you know, obviously, how do you teach somebody whose cognitive function or their defiance in their behaviors to hold it under their tongue? That's a problem, you know, and so also sometimes using some of the higher concentrate products that I use, especially in the CBD world, you know, I use a company that has a 200 per ml. So you can actually even take that in, you know, on your finger and kind of rub it into the oral cavity and just don't give them something to eat or drink. And at least get some, you know, oral absorption without going through the, you know, first pass of the liver and everything. So of course, holding it under their tongue is a great thing, but a kind of concentrate, or sometimes when people use like a more thick concentrate, which of course in the THC world, you got to be really careful with, because obviously the grain of rice that we talk about, don't be giving a grain of rice to a kid. And that's, well, for anybody, that's don't start there. But you know, but the most like pinhead type of thing can be rubbed in also as well. In this, so again, there were different types of products being used. CBD products were mostly being used. 24% were using it for insomnia. They started at 15 milligrams 3 times a day. I think that's a reasonable dose. Sometimes I'll go a little bit more as to my higher end level. Oh, this did not show up much. But what they did is they before versus after. I'm sorry about that slide. Quality of life, they said 31% of the families reported that that they had good quality of life after 67%. So again, this is a subjective question, but in terms of mood, you see from 42 up to 64% for just being able to be more independent in certain activities, an increase and good sleep. That's gonna be off. It was big. I'm sorry about that number. I apologize. Okay. During the study, 87% of the families choose to continue to because they want, because they could. And they did overall 30% said that there was significant improvement, 54% moderate improvement, etc. So overall, 84% of patients did get really nice clinical improvement. Okay, another study that they had done here, so 84% had disappearance of seizures, another 2. So again, a huge number. I mean, that's incredible, right? And most seizure medicines aren't accomplishing that kind of data. Again, restlessness better, rage attachment better. That's especially second decade of life, the rage, once these kids get bigger and the hormones start kicking in, it could be really rough on the family. Parents are coming battered and scared, you know, and then, you know, I find cannabis keeps families together because the stress of having a specialist kid is overwhelming. And, you know, we know the divorce rate is high in our country, it's much higher in autism. Kids are not having to get information. This is really quite wonderful. So but overall, again, a third of the patients have reduced medication use and didn't have them most, you know, very rarely did a did the medication need to be increased? But importantly, their antipsychotic medications decreased 25%. That's also really huge. The most common one used in autism is risperidol. I've seen kids gain 60 to 80 pounds in 1 year because of the voracious appetite that can happen. And imagine if your teen is at 120, and then imagine a year later your kid's at 180, and how they can literally throw their weight around. Again, issue. Now, also in terms of this, 25% did have at least one side effect. You can see them listed there. Restlessness being the more common when they're dry mouth, sure. Now, Epidiolex, which I had talked about there before, and as far as those calculations here, and what they, and again, you see the dosing fits it right out of the package insert, you know, and as I said, that means, you know, you could be giving a 50 pounds per person according to the dosing 450 milligrams a day. A, who could afford that? And B, wow. And again, I've never needed that type of amount doing. You know, the manufacturer sells it that if the out-of-pocket cost could be $32,000 a year. That's, you know, that's a nice car. And so obviously there's other options as well. Now, if you, I don't know if the slides are out. If you do, and I put this slide up here, if you do want to see a history of the overall history of pediatrics and cannabis, this link here, this was something that I found on PubMed. And so, you know, you can find on the slide after you view it. Now, in terms of the over-the-counter, you heard a lot about buyer beware. Obviously, because you don't know, some of them, when you look at it, you can't even figure out how much CBD is in it. You'll see it'll say milligrams in hemp parts or total cannabinoids, and you don't really know what you're getting. And again, a lot of them, they don't talk about the purity, the accuracy that you've heard about. In Florida, they made it that that CBD products have to have a QR code on it, but that only tells you, you know, to demonstrate how much THC is in it. Doesn't tell about anything else about the product. It doesn't have to know. Some companies do. So a good company will do a certificate of analysis, and will show that, you know, and a good company will run every single batch and openly display it on their website. Okay. And if they don't, I would be curious to two things. Why not? Do they know something that they don't want you to know? Or they're just not testing every batch? So to me, that's like a front requirement. Are they testing every single batch and publishing their certificate of analysis? You can see their potencies in terms of the various cannabinoids on there. You can see their terpene breakdown. You know, if you go to leafly.com and they'll show you what the most common terpenes are through different cultivation practices, etc. You might not be actually seeing what you see on Leafly, because that's a general, but when you evaluate the specific plant itself, then they can tell you what it is. And then they'll also, you know, talks about the different terpenes in this perspective. So we know that there's many and not many show up in the product, but also pesticides, and, you know, want to make sure all of those are there. You know, good companies, which I didn't put the slide here, will also check for molds and mycotoxins and heavy metals, etc. So, you know, that's what I demand in my products. And if they're not giving you that information, you know, and failing to show, well, what about this product? And I'll go to their website and I'll try and find it. And sometimes I'll see something that's great. And most of the time I'm like, I can't tell you what's in this stuff, or I can't tell you with the level of certainty as a physician that I would feel comfortable saying, yeah, I'm good with that product. Okay, so we heard about oral, and for oral, of course, there is the oral absorption aspect as well as the swallowed aspect. We know that it takes much longer once it goes through the gut. The first, you know, has to go to the door, has to get past the liver. We know that it can take about 45 minutes to an hour, even longer to absorb something oral, much faster sublingual, but still not anywhere close to what inhaled would do as far as that. Actually, where I note there about the 100 per ml for the on the tincture form, actually the company that I've been using actually goes up to 200 per ml. You know, as far as capsule folding, then you know, unlike other things, you can't really open up a capsule and split it like you can with the powder, because you can't do that. Although I have had patients who have frozen them, and then they can't cut 50 of the frozen and it's that way. And of course, suckers and lozenges allow for the oral absorption as well. Baked goods and candy, same onset as swallowed. In my opinion, if it's the way to get it down a kid, great. There's lots of sugar in there and other things that they don't need. And it's also more expensive per milligram going in those routes, etc. So for me, the tinctures are certainly the least expensive way of going on it. You know, in our practice, we also have a list of like 40 ways of hiding supplements. And so we give that to parents, and usually we can find something to get it down. Okay, there are nasal spray versions. That is a much faster way of doing it. It's the version can also be used more for potentially if you want to break the seizure faster, but it's not inhaling. You know, there are suppositories that are out there, although there's not many. But you know, again, faster absorption, similar to sublingual as well. And they can get very well absorbed there as well. We know that from other aspects of medical use. They also can be used vaginally to treating vaginal symptoms. So for cramps and stuff like that, I did actually early in my career have a, in my cannabis part, say to me, it described it as an aphrodisiac, which I looked up and she said, it's weird. I don't feel high, but my uterus does. But not a pediatric comment, of course, but I just think that's a great line. So anyways, topicals, of course, how well were they getting absorbed? Obviously, things that are fat-based getting into the skin, which is obviously a barrier. So of course, I had some opportunity to talk with Dr. Block last night for a while and really take his brain. So I really appreciate him spending time with me last night, who was really questioning about transdermals and the effectiveness. But I can tell you from a clinical perspective, patches are great. The only problem is that they're expensive, but if you have a kid who, obviously nurses can't administer at school, so but a parent can put it on ahead of time. Now, of course, if it gets taking it off and passing it along or licking it, that's not good. But I typically find that putting a patch between the shoulder blades is both out of sight, out of mind, especially for my kids and my autistic kids who they see to peel it off, but also unless you're a contortionist, you can't really get back to that area. Although I did have one innovative child who just rubbed back and forth on his chair until he got it off that way. But most of the times it's a good way of doing it. And where it would be much less likely to share it. Inhaled, of course, the fastest way of all. Of course, as I said, I don't endorse anybody smoking something, and of course, in kids smoking, burning, that's not allowed in Florida until anyway. But vaporizing the flower, as I mentioned, they used to have standardized cups that can be put into a K-cup type of thing where they can do it as a vaporization. Of course, when in the adult world where flowers can be done more dry earth vape situation as well, and all of the different types of concentrates that are out there as well, which have different ways of producing a higher concentrate. Okay, so you'll see these concentrates in syringes, the nasal sprays that you see on the right. There's different types of vape pens that you'll see available. Now, I do find that a lot of my kids will vape, okay? And why do I want that? If I need rapid onset, in case of emergency break glass. I have some families who are like, hey, I can't get my, I'll give my kid a dose in the morning and it could work by the time they get to school, but I can't get them to do anything in the morning. And so some of them will inhale and at least they can get the morning going and they can get them fed and out the door, okay? One company does have a meter dose inhaler, so I am showing you a particular product here. They're the only ones who do make it. But rapid onset, 10 to 15 seconds. So again, if you're breathing, even if you're having a seizure with a mask, and of course, a meter dose inhaler up to our mouth, most of it gets back to the throat, never gets down to the lungs, spacer allows it to come in. But if the person's breathing, you can still get them to inhale cannabis without having any action on their parts. That can be really good if it's having an epileptic seizure or something like that. There are different patches that are available. One company you can see has different ratios. Actually, the ones you do almost all do have different types of ratios. Just as clear, I do not have any financial association with any of these companies here. Of course, I tested that, but just let that be clear. And so, different types of patches that are available. Now, how I introduce it, as I mentioned, I always introduce the CBD product first. I'll typically go every 3 days before I make an increase. And 2 to 3 times a day is typically the average, but I do have people who need only once a day for sleep or multiple times during the day. And of course, with school, that's what the patches can be very helpful. Okay, so this is my dosing strategies when it comes to children, as well as can use this for adults as well. So for CBD, a very sensitive person, so if someone says I react to everything, that's where I'll be talking 2 to 3 milligrams the starting dose. No, so basically what I start at is what I jump at. So if I'm starting with 2 milligrams, 3 days later I'll go to 4 milligrams, 6 milligrams, etc. In the CBD world, certainly, again, we can be much faster with this. So I'll typically start a young child around 5 milligrams, and a teen or adult, I'll typically start at 10, or if it's a 50 per ml dropper, 12.5 to 0.25 milliliters, so somewhere around that. But again, increasing at the same level. Okay. Now, I always will then bring in THC alone. If the CBD, if the family's ready to go to THC. Okay, because again, some of these others, CBN, which mentioned wonderful for sleep. I've been taking it myself for 3 years. I haven't slept this well since before medical school, and I had to wake up for every time. So I'm back to sleeping well, which is great. But we had mentioned THC. Not only can CBD be used as an antidote if someone has too much THC, but taking CBD can lower, and I've seen even stop the intoxicating effect of THC. So the reason why I want to bring the CBD in first and then bring the THC second, I tell parents, keep the CBD going as you're bringing in the THC. And then if you say, oh, yeah, my kid's seeming a little high now, either decrease, but you can find increasing the CBD more can then allow you to go further. So it's all that balance that's out there. And I have seen people with CBD, I've had them inhale it and I've seen them almost rapidly turn around and almost stupor, breathing comfortably, but not able to answer questions until 2 minutes later. I had one patient, I haven't seen a lot of patients, happened to live around the corner. The only time I've broken the Florida law, I had a CBD vape pen and I went around the corner because she was also a family friend and I said, try this. And sure enough, 5 minutes later, she's like, hi, David, what are you doing here? I'm like, and with THC, again, much younger, 1 milligrams, that's where also edibles and gummies, they just can't be just broken down that small. I wrote 2 milligrams for kids, you can cut with a nice blade, down a 10 milligram to 2.5. So 2.5 is good to be there. And adults, I'll typically start at 5. Again, these are for newbies, and obviously people come in who've been using for a long time. I'm not going to give them something smaller than they've been using, but these are my newbie type of introductions. And then micro dosing, which is a small amount being given all day long. It's like 1 milligram an hour, 1 milligram an hour, maybe 2. If it's more than that, it's not micro dosing. But there can be different effects from that, and patches actually do that naturally. Now, in terms of strains, and again, I don't really focus so much on strains. In fact, we usually from cultivars because strains are really from viruses and bacteria. I know it's more the term that we use, but I don't find that there's a particular product that's good for everybody for a particular product. You've talked about the terpene wheel. I'm sure you heard about it. I don't have time to talk about that because I have about 1 more minute. But in terms of the side effects, again, very little known about the long-term effects of it. We do know it affects brain development. Up until 22 years of age, it actually has been shown to impact it. So that's a concern that I have with the pediatrician. But when using as a teenager, the drug can impair thinking, memory, etc. So that is a thing, which is why I just have them use as little as possible, but focusing on all of these other cannabinoids. And we're really still just trying to figure out what the long-term effects are. But as any side effect is seen, the dose, it may last a few hours. But the good thing, you wake up the next day, you kind of get a reset button. So at least you didn't have to break your kid. So that's watching it open. Alrighty, just real quickly in terms of the side effects, there for our teens, there's that Duke University study that was conducted in New Zealand, but 8% IQ points when being used between 13 and 38. That's the thing, IQ kind of important. And those who started smoking as adults didn't show that. So again, something just to be cautious of. They actually did twin studies and of who used and so. Again, 4 points that were found to be lower in this particular study, and it declined. Again, it could have been due to something. One of the bad things is that who is maybe some of these teens are drinking and smoking and do other types of things. So, that's the problem with research is that you almost can never get it as a single variable. Okay, I'm going to do this, but again, there is something called the ABCD study. That's an ongoing study that there are tens of thousands. I think they have hit the 10,000 now. So it's a huge database to really look at the side effects. Also, just really quickly looking out for cytochrome P450 reactions. I did build a database of all the medications that are out there and their CYP interactions, as well as for cannabis, so that I can tell people, is it speeding it up, is it slowing down, the way we expect that to go. And lastly, the Academy of Pediatrics is certainly not in favor. There's no shocker there. They do support further research, so they're not trying to shut it down, but certainly they are not endorsing it. So overall, limited research, that's the biggest take-home message. It is growing, but we need a lot more. But it does really seem to cut things down. It really, I see it works better than a lot of the pharmaceuticals that are out there. They can reduce lots of symptoms, sleep, GI, we've heard some about before. And again, I have seen people completely succumb. So overall, it's an important tool. It's not the only tool. It's not getting to the cause of a person's illness. That's why we practice functional medicine principles. And I look at vitamin D levels and zinc levels and gut studies and all of that. But in terms of a safe and effective treatment, thank you very much. All right, does anybody have 5 minutes for questions? Does anybody have any questions? Yes, in the back, please.
My question is the people that had adverse reactions, were they naive, cannabis naive, were their CBD levels?
That wasn't reported. So it's just like they would give the people the product and then they would see how to react.
Okay, and then the other thing is With regard to SSRIs and pharmaceuticals, how does that affect IQ, cognition, et cetera?
Fair question, something that I haven't looked at.
Okay.
Yes, here.
So you say you've been able to get a lot of your patients off certain medications and on using medical marijuana. One of my biggest obstacles is cost. The pharmaceuticals are covered by insurance. Medical marijuana obviously is not. How do you, what kind of conversation you have with your patients in order to get them over?
Well, I think part of it is also the going low and start, slow and low concept. Okay, because yes, if a person starts at 10 milligrams, that may be fine, but 5 may have worked also. So, it is a problem, obviously, it's going to be a long way before this isn't covered. This is covered by insurance.
I can't even talk to them about medical cannabis when I'm talking about another pain issue that's being covered by insurance. They have to actually come to a separate appointment to discuss the medical cannabis. So that's more money.
Yeah.
And then they have to do the fee to get the card. That's more money. And then the cost of the medication itself, that's more money. Boom. Most of my patients, they've already stopped the conversation.
Yeah.
Moving forward.
Yeah, and it's a big thing. I mean, even it's in terms of, with more underserved populations, from an equity perspective, there's just a lot of populations that can't access them. There definitely needs to be a certain level of paycheck there in order to do that. And that's the reason why I did divide my practice into two sides for that very reason. And now my practice, we don't take health insurance. I'm looking forward to that though. That alleviates some of that because people who are coming to my office, there's a self-selection bias, I would say, because they have to save with the on one side also, which is also why I have a big social media presence, so I can talk about these things and educate people about them all the time. And so I focus on that. But it's a big problem. I mean, I would love to figure out, obviously, if we're dealing with a Schedule I drug, we're not going to be getting any kind of insurance coverage on it. Where that will be, they'd have to reschedule it, which a lot of us have problems with because then the farmer gets involved with it and those levels of regulation. And of course, many of us are calling for deregulation, which of course, if it's deregulated, then it wouldn't be covered by insurance no matter what. So it's a problem. It's absolutely.
Education saves patients money, right? So you teach them the right products to look for. They don't waste money on the upfront, right? You can teach patients how to use concentrates, which can be significantly less expensive as well. So a key is appropriate education.
Yeah, and in fact, because of the fact that I do talk about specific, the specific companies that do the type of testing that I do, a lot of my pediatric patients, once I teach them about CBD, CBG, and even in the cannabis clinics, they're coming for a certification. They then decide, well, I don't need my card to do that, right? So I don't need to spend the money now. And, we're available during that 7 months. We don't charge for questions for that. So a lot of families, they actually don't even come back for a cert because they never certed in the first place. So it's all about education and being available to them and having the knowledge and knowing how to do that tinkering with the different types of doses and terpenes and all of that. But yeah, so that's the thing. I have patients who just never come back because they have it all figured out by the time 7 months is over.
Thank you so much for helping children, Doc. You know how personal that is to me. Of all the children on the spectrum, what's the youngest child you treat?
Well, the youngest child's period has been 18 months for a kid with brain cancer. I'd say probably about 2.5, 3. Yeah. And these are really, really tough kids. Again, not where we would be going first. And still we're talking in the C world, not the T world. Yes, sir.
Hello, Doc. Will CBD help children that have sickle cell anemia with pain crisis and also constipation?
Okay, so to me, constipation is an interesting thing because even some forms can even slow things down. In fact, that's probably maybe why the inflammatory bowel disease people who have a lot of diarrhea, how it kind of normalizes it. So it can, especially oral, push people into constipation. So that is something to watch for. What was it? You said constipation and sickle cell. I'm sorry. Okay, so this comes back to the general concept of inflammation. Okay, and pain, of course, inflammatory cycle. So it's not going to stop somebody from sickling, right? But in terms of making them feel better from a pain perspective. All right. Well, thank you very much. That's my time. Have a great day. And I get one more sentence in here. Okay, so Dr. Jenny Vaughn-Curtman will be now talking about clinical applications of medical cannabis, how to dose and recommend.
You guys gonna wake up? Let's get loud. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. We're like J-Lo. Woo, 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 woo. That's right. That's my homeboy back there. What's going on? You hear that? Can you hear that? Let's get loud. We're making some noise in the pharmaceutical space, right? We are fighting a battle. Dr. Gupta, are you behaving down there? It is so good to see you. Oh my goodness. Maybe I just changed it because I didn't like it. You know? So my kids are up here in the front row though. Check it out. They're always supported. Let's see, where is this? I know. They can come up here and do this presentation. It is so important to educate. And I played that music because high frequency music stimulates dopamine synthesis, right? And suppresses the parasympathetic nervous system, very much like CBD. So just think of music, 528 hertz, activating your brain and telling you like, hi guys, I'm alive over here. I'm not dead, right? When you look around the United States, I see like the Walking Dead because they're all chronically deficient in cannabinoids. So I want to do a little bit of back history. Cannabinoids are not just in the cannabis plant. There's a lot of misconception. God created cannabinoids, phytocannabinoids, to have a synergistic relationship with our entire body. This is, let your food be your medicine and your medicine be thy food, right? Never has a truer word been spoken. We have the tools for our tool bank, for our car to function properly. And these are other things that cannabis, the cannabis plant can be used for, not just for medicine. There is so much more that this wonderful, beautiful plant is used for. It's found in echinacea, black pepper, chocolate, mangoes, liverwort, rosemary, evergreen. I've gotten high off of non-GMO mangoes, the skin. And then babies, let's talk about babies. You're a pediatrician, right? There is more THC in breast milk than there is in a bud of weed. So what do you think makes babies activate that brain to tell the brain, I need to eat, I need to survive? This is all programmed biochemistry by our wonderful maker. It is so cool. Biochemistry is so cool, by the way. Super cool. And you talked, the panelists talked about the synthesis of the plant. I'm not going to bore you with that. So THC and CBD, that's when you're going to have homeostasis. I always recommend doing that full spectrum or the broad spectrum, unless somebody has mood altering disorders like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. THC is not something you want to give somebody that has an overactive, receptor sites. CBD is what's calming those receptor sites, right? So THC alone by itself, people get too high. It can be dangerous. Just because something is natural to the body doesn't mean that it doesn't have the propensity for abuse, right? People OD on water, folks, right? Many deaths throughout the year. You can OD on natural things as well, right? Just having adverse reactions. And this is something that in the pharmaceutical space, people don't talk about the contraindications, of THC with other drugs. And these are drugs from big pharma that are genetically modified. The endocannabinoid system functions all over different regions of the brain. The body movement, the cerebellum, the hippocampus, the medulla oblongata, right? Cerebral cortex, movement, basal ganglia, the hippocampus. It is full brain. CB1 receptor is in the brain. CB2 receptor is in the gut. Literally every cell, every neurotransmitter, every vitamin, every mineral in the body depends on the endocannabinoid system as the conductor to regulate full body. So being in the pharmaceutical space, AgeVital Wellness, it's a vertically integrated pharmacy research wellness. This is what we do. We manufacture drugs that are functional for doctors' offices and actually help increase compliance by creating functional medications, right? There is a difference between medicinal cannabis and pharmaceutical cannabis, right? In order for cannabis to be considered a pharmaceutical, it has to be quantifiable. It has to be dosable, right? I can't put a prescription on a glass of wine. You know, wine is medicinal too, right? So when I can't wait for that future where we have the recreational, cannabis shops, and then of course the pharmaceutical cannabis shops where you're making things functional for somebody and you're replacing what big pharma has. Okay, folks, our kids are not deficient in Adderall. We're not deficient in Prozac, Wellbutrin. These are all drugs that damage the prefrontal cortex of the brain. They damage the basal ganglia. Literally, these drugs are addictive. They wreak havoc on the sympathetic nervous system. They cause an adverse side effects, longer list of side effects than the benefits, and they're all genetically modified. People forget, like, okay, Adderall, talking about a methamphetamine here, a genetically modified version of meth. Ritalin in children as young as 5, we're giving kids legal cocaine, a mirror image of it. It is our moral duty as providers to at first do no harm. When in doubt, don't, right? And what do we do every day? I played that game, being part of this allopathic caterpillar line, just being big pharma's puppet, at the pharmacy. Here's your Prozac, your Ritalin, your Trazodone. Here's your Viagra, guys, because we're all Viagra deficient, right? No, why? Where does a guy's erection start if they're having an erectile dysfunction disorder, right? It starts in the brain. Everything is a neurological disorder, especially in this country. Everything is designed to inflame you. Our foods are poisonous. Our water's poisonous. There's estrogen in everything, causing endocrine disruptors in our society. So people are walking around with debilitating diseases and inflammation of everything, of the guts, of the skin, right? So we need to be better for the consumer. We need to be educated. I'm going to teach you guys how to dose, but here's a lot of studies that have been done in different countries, reduces intraocular pressure. In my pharmacy, I make CBD eye drops. Okay, our dispensaries need to be educated. I want to see a future where dispensaries have pharmacists, right? And they have medication management within a dispensary. My ex-mother-in-law, for example, she was a very canna curious. She never smoked, but she did go to a dispensary and there was nobody there to talk to her about not to vape until she got home, until she got a gauge of what she was doing. She ended up getting into a car crash because she got too high, right? She could have died. So we need to be responsible. The whole entire endocannabinoid system. You have the pharmacodynamics of the plant, the pharmacokinetics of the plant, and the pharmacology of the plant. Postsynaptic and presynaptic neurons, how it gets regulated, self-regulation, unhindered receptor sites like you see on this side right here. So that's a synaptic nerve ending that's functioning the way it should, but sometimes that's not always a good thing. And when it comes to pharmaceuticals, you are stimulating through outside sources to get a direct effect, a response. If you're overproducing different neurotransmitters, if your body's not absorbing certain nutrients, if your body's not absorbing certain vitamins, adding cannabinoids to someone's maintenance. I'm not saying 100% take somebody off of their medication. Every doctor is different. That's going to be dependent on the provider and that relationship. I'm all about autonomy. The patient's going to tell me what they're feeling, right? More than what I know what they're feeling. And then when I'm doing testing, if I see a woman, I'm talking to an OBGYN, my pharmacists are consulting progesterone, for example, and their levels aren't increasing, you add some CBD to it, all of a sudden their progesterone levels are absorbing because now it's being regulated and modulated by the conductor. So they're deficient. So cannabinoid and CBD receptor interactions, we have the endogenous ligands, we have antagonists and partial agonists and agonists. So it's like blocking key mechanisms. It's like bobby pins to get into different pathways neurologically or in the gut. I love Dr. Verma, how she was talking about the gut relationship because yes, serotonin, and most of our neurotransmitters are developed in the gut from good bacteria. And even our good bacteria requires cannabinoids to thrive. So if you have this microbiome in 10-to-1, we're more microbial than we are cellular. You guys remember your biochemistry? That's trillions and trillions of cells, and we have more microbes in our system, on our body, in our body than we do cells. That is mind-blowing. So very simplified neurotransmission, postsynaptic, presynaptic neurons to show you how cannabinoids affect those nerve endings. So it's a literal chemical charge that happens in between the cells, very much like radio waves making signals to the body. So on-off switch to get desired effects. And I'm going to skip forward because I found out we only have 25 minutes and not 45 minutes. Cannabis affects different medications. It affects the liver enzymes, specifically the CYP2C9 and the CYP3A4 enzymes. So when you're talking to a patient recommending cannabinoids, you want to manage the medications that they're taking as well, because different cannabinoids will either, turn off or make something not work very well, like medications that are affected, amiodarone, the cimetidine, the metronidazole, fluoxetine, erythromycin, verapamil. Transplant meds, THC completely turns off transplant meds, and that can be very dangerous. So there are contraindications in the pharmaceutical field. You don't want to combine different medications specifically for THC. Ketoconazole, by the way, if you're taking cannabinoids, it's going to double the effects. Warfarin, sensitivity increases with THC use because THC is a natural blood thinner, just like vitamin K is a natural blood thinner. Vitamin E is a natural blood thinner. You don't want to give THC and vitamin A and vitamin E to someone that's taking those supplements. So it's very important. And especially if you're doing lab work, now you're becoming functional, right? So to get them all warfarin, you're going to be using THC because that's God's medicine and not rat poison, right? Echinacea, for example, that's a cannabinoid that bonds to CB2 receptors. Echinacea does. So in the gut, so all the studies are showing like echinacea, vitamin D3, essential fatty acids like 369, ALA, EPA. These are all forms of cannabinoids, like precursors. So biochemistry is so cool because you have to have those conversions in your body. So just like organic acids in the body, for example, tryptophan, right? You're deriving that from turkey, and that tryptophan then converts into 5-HTP, and then that 5-HTP converts into serotonin. Then serotonin converts into the 5-HIA, which is that 5-hydroxyindoacetate. And then it converts into melatonin and all the sleep, homeostasis, and blah, 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 growth hormone. And you're like, I'm drinking 5 every morning because I know how to take the right fuel for my brain, right? Cannabinoids do the same thing. They have a conversion in the system that you're deriving from foods that are GMO. So St. John's wort acts on those CB2 receptors as well. So you want to make sure that you're not overdosing on certain cannabinoids, or you're not taking something that's going to amplify the effects. This is a really cool study on how big pharma and the functional medicine world, right, can merge together. Harvard did this study to show that patients that were taking opiates and using CBD, it reduced all of the side effects reported from big pharma by astronomical effect. This is not something that you normally see in clinical trials. Fatigue, for example, the patients before CBD, 70.1% of them were feeling fatigue, but after taking the CBD, they only 9.4% reported they were feeling that. That is so awesome. So it literally turned a big pharmaceutical drug. It increased compliance, reduced the adverse effects of the medication, and helped the patient so much better because now they're having all these regenerative properties. I can't see that down there. That's way too far. Drowsiness, that's huge. 70.9% of opiate users experience drowsiness. And then you're adding 25 to 30 milligrams of CBD to that opiate that they're taking, their drowsiness goes away. It got reduced to only 12.8%. Those are gigantic numbers. There was one in here, dizziness, that went down to 0. 35.9% of patients taking the opiates experienced dizziness. And then after they added CBD, it complemented, it took away their dizziness. So if anybody here, doctors have patients that, you know, when you're taking an opiate, you feel terrible, right? So you want to help them. That is our job. It's our moral duty. Cannabinoids work by regulating nerves. They send signals to neurotransmitters to get an effect, like traffic lights, right? Circuit breakers, fuses. I'm full of analogies because it helps you to understand it a little bit better. So let's get into some case studies that I've personally been involved with. This is one of my 4-year-old patients. They came to me through my pharmacy. Hospice came to our house and they were going to have her die. You know, we're going to do everything to make her comfortable. After she got chemoed and radiated to death by All Children's Center in Tampa, I literally went to court, got 12 other doctors and fought for this little girl to make sure that they allowed functional regenerative medicine because cannabis wasn't even an option for her. Nobody ever offered her cannabis. And this was during the time, you remember, we were lobbying. This was just so brand new and fresh. I mean, the parents were ready to go to Mexico and do CBD treatment, THC. She had stage 4 leukemia and she had lost, she was 10 pounds. Look at her. She was the most saddest, loneliest. She hated doctors. How sad is that? That this little girl would scream, I hate doctors, I hate doctors. She would scream and she was in so much pain, guys. It was like having one of my children, knowing that you could do something to help a child, right? All of the efforts of allopathic medicine were unsuccessful. And then the last thing that they offered was, okay, we just gotta make sure that she's dying very gently with all your medications. We went to court, we won, we infused her in our pharmacy, we made the IV bags of CBD. This little girl in 6 months was alive because of cannabinoids. She was taking 100 milligrams of CBD 3 times a day. She was taking 5 milligrams of THC to go to sleep every single day. Vitamin C infusions, vitamin D, the doctor put a port. Look at this. I used to do all of her treatments with my providers in the Princess Jasmine costume because that was her favorite princess. So now this little girl is probably one of the most healthiest little girls I have ever met. She still comes into my store. She's best friends with my daughter. They're both the same age. That's a text message that one of that her mother sent me. This was back in February 8th, 2017. She said, today we celebrated 3 years since Lily's last chemo appointment, since she has been blessed with 3 years of being free of poisons. Guys, this is what we're supposed to be doing, right? I didn't charge this patient either because no kid gets left behind. We should be fighting to be able to have access to medicine like this, functional medicine, right? We can poison people with genetically modified garbage, but we can't offer them glutathione. We can't offer them vitamin D3 that doesn't, even though we have all the studies, all the science, right? Let's go to another patient that had diabetes, metabolic syndrome, one on the left, diabetes, the beautiful couple, big, huge corporate executives for a large company, the Cohens, CBD for weight loss. Weight loss, 50 milligrams twice a day, because it regulates and suppresses the parasympathetic nervous system. It gets rid of cortisol in your body, the stress. People are fat and inflamed in this country because of chronic stress. You're living and breathing, you have stress. Boyfriends give you stress, husbands give you stress, children give you stress, life gives you stress, right? Eating gives you stress. It is one of the facts of life. You're going to be stressed if you're living and breathing. So how do you live functionally in an environment where you're all stressed, right? We get stressed out from here looking at, you know, no one liked me today on my social media, right? Cortisol production, and then people walk around with these little Buddha bellies. CBD for weight loss. It is awesome. It suppresses your hunger, helps you to absorb your vitamin D3 better. You're taking vitamin D3 injections or you're taking oral capsules, and the higher the dose of vitamin D3, the better, right? Remember, big pharma's who invented the international units. That's not really a thing. So when you're talking about 100,000 IUs of vitamin D3, you're only taking 15 milligrams, which is nothing. So, and then we're told, oh, we recommend 1,000 milligrams, 5,000 milligrams. That's nothing. No, I give my patients 100,000 IUs to 300,000 IUs of vitamin D3 every single week. Their bones stop hurting. They're losing weight. They never get sick. And then you're taking cannabinoids along with that. Your brain is getting younger. We only have 5 minutes. Holy moly. Here's another executive. This was a metabolically obese individual, right? Like it looks like his younger brother on the right-hand side, doesn't it? He's just fatigued. He's a 40-year-old man that looked like he was in his 50s. And then he started taking CBD, THC, L-lysine. He had herpes, no longer has herpes because L-lysine, amino acids talk with one another. It's very intelligent design. Amino acids literally communicate. So instead of taking a big pharmaceutical drug that's going to degenerate his body, degenerate his cells even more, right? And cause his immune system to be suppressed even more. L-lysine, something that we could actually test for too. We can test for L-glutamine deficiencies, L-lysine deficiency. We can test for cannabinoid deficiencies. There is a lab in Canada that does cannabinoid testing, right? And a combination of all of this stuff, no more herpes, L-glutamine signals the herpes to retreat back into the spinal ganglia. The L-lysine tells the virus to stop, and then the CBD modulates, increases the immune system to help him have less of that cytokine storm, right? Our body is like a car. You get those warning lights in your car that says, change your oil, Jenny, you know, and then you go over it and then you're like, well, my car doesn't work because, well, I told you that, you know, this was happening. Most people don't pay attention to those warning lights and the wait last minute and then the carburetor, all of this stuff. You have to check your spark plugs. You have to look at your hood. You have to rotate your tires, folks. This is our body. This is biochemistry. It's not that hard. We can test. We don't have to guess. Look at him from the side. Amazing. Amazing. And now he's playing volleyball. He's got the energy, the stamina to be around his kids, right? People are not living in this country. They're just existing. They're walking around with a pain in something, right? You can live. You don't have to just exist. This one of my favorites. Oh my gosh, she actually cleans my pharmacies, right? Put her on progesterone. The OBGYN, you know, checked all of her hormones. She was always overweight, 221 pounds. She's from Brazil. And this is what she told me. Oh, Dr. Jenny, no, you know, I'm never going to be skinny person. You're just tiny little person. I'm big bone. And I'm like, what doctor's gloom and doctor's doom told you that you would never be in shape? Hello, let me empower you, queen, right? Let's be bringers of faith, love, and hope to our clients, our patients. They need us to encourage them. Now, because look how hot she is. Whoosh. You know, she went out and got her. She was walking around cleaning our store, so confident, no more pain. 50 milligrams for weight loss. The HCG diet helped her. She was losing about 1 to 3 pounds a day. The vitamin injections, no skin that was loose. This is awesome. The applications for cannabinoids are astronomical. This is a book that I wrote. It's a medical PDR, pharmaceutical PDR, where I'm going to teach you how to dose in every clinical setting. I have 12 different publications of this. Everything from acne to infantile spasms, Lennox syndrome, and I have my recommendations on how to write the compounds and send it to a pharmacy. Doesn't have to be my pharmacy. If there's a compounding pharmacy and they have API, active pharmaceutical ingredient, not all CBD is created equal, guys. There are synthetic cannabinoids. Big Pharma makes them just like they make synthetic hormones as well. bioidentical hormones, synthetic hormones. There is a difference. You want to give your woman Premarin, that's from pregnant horses' urine. You want to give them pig thyroid, that's Armour thyroid. Why are we giving our patients synthetic animal stuff? You know, you imagine if we put human hormones in a horse and the side effects that would happen. Oh, dang flabbit.
Yep.
So if you want a copy of my book, you can send me an email. I have dosing for everything from cocaine addiction, pain management, and these are all peer-reviewed studies from the top and the best universities all around the country. Cancer-related anorexia, acne. My dermatologists are obsessed with my microbiome CBD cleanser and moisturizer, as opposed to getting these toxic chemicals from big pharma that make your skin worse. So your patients are going to start looking younger, feeling younger. They're going to live longer. They're going to love you. All right. Does anybody have any questions? Boop, boop. You can see, you know, I literally just took snapshots of pieces of my book, and then all the dosing and the recommendation at the bottom. Just like when you're writing a compound and you're sending, you know, bias. How many people here use bioidentical hormones? And I have somebody has a question in the back.
Do you have any dosing recommendations for patients with traumatic brain injuries?
Yes, and I actually put it on, I think I have it, psychosis and schizophrenia recommendations, acute memory, episodic seizure-induced from cocaine. I'm pretty sure I put the slide in here. This was a very good one. But yes, I work with the NFL. I usually do NFL athletic panels. I'll send you that study. But yeah, the dosing is very high. It's 100 milligrams of CBD taken TID, and then titrating THC 3 milligrams. I always recommend starting conservatively and then going up, because you don't want to get too high, right? You want to be able to function. So I would start with 3 milligrams of THC and then titrate based on the person's weight. Make sure you take a picture of this here. At the end, I have my information. I have my cell number there and my email address. And then I'll send you the studies. You guys can have copies of the slides.
Do we have a question over here? No? Okay. Anybody else have a question?
Come on, come on. Turn the radio on. Let's go. Dr. Gupta. Oh my gosh, she just turned 9. She, during the pandemic, her parents all got COVID. She didn't get COVID at all. Isn't that amazing? Yep, and she'll be at my house having play dates, little Lily. Yeah, and I had dogs since then, even animal treatments. I've treated leopards and lions in Miami, like Wesley Chapel, a snow leopard, cannabinoids. Even my own dog that I adopted that was covered in tumors, right? And I put THC and CBD oil on all his tumors, gave him vitamin D3 shots, treated him just like a human. All of his tumors went away. And everybody thinks this dog is a puppy and they're going to put him to sleep. They're going to put him to sleep. Well, if it doesn't work, let's just off him, right? If it doesn't work, let's rip it out. It's like a barbaric system as opposed to get to the root cause of the problem. What are the real underlying issues? Thank you, guys. Anybody else? The vitamin D injections, I have practitioner pricing. So they usually run about $50 per vial. 100,000 I use per ml. Oh yeah, I'm the only one that does that. And I make 30 ml vials, 60 ml vials. My doctors love it. I take, my goodness, my whole family, right? We were having like a poking party and and it was like, come on guys, we were at Universal the other day. We don't want to get sick. You're around a lot of people. They're sneezing and germs, blah, blah. We did vitamin D shots the moment we get back, and then boom. My kids, they tell me they have a sore throat. That sickness only lasts for an hour because we're giving the body exactly what it needs, right? Yes.
So I didn't want to ask a question, but I just wanted to say something. Back in 2014, I think, or 2017, there were like 4 or 5, 6 puppies, sick puppies, and they were on the verge of death. And my mom decided to give them cannabis, and they were nursed back to health, and they were all given homes, and they're healthy as ever now because of cannabis.
Isn't that amazing? This doctor calls me in the middle of the night. She's like, Dr. Jenny, she goes, I lost the mother of this dog. They came 3 weeks early. They can't eat, they can't suckle, they're lethargic. They were less than half a pound each. Middle of the night, I open up my pharmacy. Yeah, Walgreens is gonna do that, right? It was a referral. She didn't even know me. It was a referral from another doctor. They're like, call this biochemist. She's a coon, right? She's a Latin girl. She's gonna cook something up and save those dogs. So I made a whole entire manuka honey with other immunoglobulins and full spectrum cannabinoids. So 5 milligrams per ml in this little syringe. So I brought all these little tubes. I'll send you the video if anybody reaches out to me. Tiny little puppies, we just started putting it underneath their tongue within 30 seconds of feeding the puppies this tincture. They started yipping like looking for a boob. And then we get the goat milk, but they didn't want to suckle because they didn't have the breast contact with their mother that stimulated that THC, that activated that CB1 receptor that said, you're alive, eat, you're hungry, right? THC gives you the munchies, guys. So if you have the munchies, you have someone that doesn't want to eat, it's great for the elderly. I love sending my patients to a doctor, to Dr. Berger, because they're going to get THC and they can't eat. When you're eating, you're being nourished, right? I give THC to my elderly patients. I love you. You need to eat more. You're not going to live off of croutons and salads. You're going to have appetite. That means you're deficient. So we're going to give you an appetite. And then they get stronger, don't they? It's awesome.
Well, thank you. We do need to wrap up. Thank you very much, Dr. Jenny. Okay, last but not least, my dear friend, Dr. Barry Gordon, one of the true warriors for all of us. His advocacy and everything, really, we owe a tremendous amount of thanks to this gentleman. And Dr. Barry's, he's going to be talking about medical cannabis, a doctor's moral imperative. Dr. Gordon.
Awesome. Listen, it's so great to see everybody, and I mean that. Open the doors. I want Gene to hear this, and his lovely wife Dana as well, and his entire staff. And I want everybody to give them a really great round of applause, because this has been a great conference. And Gene does what he does, and he does it with excellence. But I know he's aided by his lovely wife Dana, and she's kind of in the background there. It prompts me to remind myself to thank my lovely wife, who's been the champion with me. And I know a lot of you, Patty, and a lot of you have encountered her this weekend. And I like to say, if you want to know about cannabis products in the state of Florida, there's nobody that you're going to encounter who's more willing to share what she knows, just to make one early joke, and there'll be more. But I like to feel that Patty and I are kind of the longitudinal studies that people refer to. And I'm not going to go any further than that. But anyway, listen, it's great to have everybody here. This is a fantastic conference. There's so many people here that I know and love, and so many new people too that I've never encountered, people that have come from far, Denver and other places. And we welcome everybody here. It's been so incredible to encounter everybody. And I think what you see about medical cannabis, it's so unique, is that everybody does it a little bit differently, right? And, I've always said that, when I break a hip, and, let's hope that doesn't happen, I'm just turned 67, that discussion about age earlier in the conference was interesting. As I was an emergency physician for 35 years, I kept on bumping up what was considered to be old, but 67 is getting a little close to 70, but I'm in the zone of maintenance now. I want to keep what I got for the next 20 years. If I get to 87, like I am at 67, still rooting for the same sports teams, driving and traveling, which would be the Cleveland Browns, Lori back there. But anyway, I'll be happy. Anyway, let's get, and listen, you put your pens down. There's not going to be any great science here. As everybody knows, I'm kind of the squeaky wheel of the industry. So, but I want to really give us a moral charge towards why I bring the passion that I do every day to the cannabis space, because I really think it's a moral imperative. This is my clinic. I only have one, Compassionate Cannabis Clinic. That's how you can find me. I do want to give a shout out. Dr. Berger's been on and other docs out in the audience as well. We have a podcast called The Green Room. It's every Thursday morning. We have 138 episodes in the can. It tends to be kind of political, but very cannabis intensive as well. You can find it on YouTube. That's the other ways that you can connect with me. I have no financial affiliations with anybody. I do have one question though, and I know it'll get past me if I don't ask it. And you don't have to raise your hand if you don't want to. I will raise mine. Are there any other doctors involved in any of the applicants on the 74 applications? I'm just kind of interested for personal reasons. Anybody at all? Dr. Block, yeah. Interesting, because I don't know where they found 74 doctors in the state, quite frankly, to go on the application. It was really curious to me. Anyway, so that's me. So I'm an Ohio Stater. As you heard yesterday when I had to chide Dr. Conan for leaving Ohio State out about 8 times since he goes to the institutions. But I was an emergency physician. That's my training. And listen, I got out of my training in 1981. So I'm a 74, high school grad, straight arrow. I love some of my colleagues who went into nursing for a number of years, and then they became physicians, or paramedics have become physicians. I went straight out of high school to a 7-year, 4-year college, 3-year med school at Ohio State. And then I hit the emergency medicine world. And that's what I've done for my entire career, all up in Northeast Ohio, never in Florida. And boy, the changes that I saw in 40 years of American healthcare, right? We're all out here experiencing the same things right now. And I had a very unique experience when I was up in Tallahassee this past legislative session where Dr. Joel Rudman, who we should all know, put his name into your noggin. He's the new doctor in the House of Representatives. Okay. And I'm not going to speak to his politics. You can look it up on your own. Okay. But the point is that he's going to be critical as we go forward. Dr. Ralph Mazzullo has been the doctor in the House of Representatives, and he's going to be termed out. So we need to make our connections and our contacts. But when I was up in Tallahassee speaking in favor of telehealth, I looked Dr. Rudman in the eyes and I said, Dr. Rudman, I'm here because it's hard being a physician these days, right? We need every arrow in the quiver, And, he came out afterwards and shook my hand and said, thank you. And I looked at him and I said, it's also hard being a patient these days. Right? Because they don't know who to trust. They don't know where the misinformation is coming from, right? So I think our moral obligation at this point is to speak the best truth that we can, right? We've all gained the experience that we've gained from healthcare. I'm so glad I'm out of the emergency medicine business. I got out pre-COVID. My colleagues that are still working in the ER, and I know there's some of you out here, it's miserable these days, what I'm told, the lack of respect. And I love my mid-levels. I do, my nurse practitioners, my PAs, but they're not doctors. They're not. And there's been so many. Listen, I'll tell you what I worry about. I was going to pop a slide in, but it came to me a late thought. This whole AI thing, they may AI us all out of the diagnostic biz in the next 5 to 10 years. It's going to be crazy. So in my career in emergency medicine, I want to go a couple slides forward, one slide forward. Where are the victories, right? In my 40 years of emergency medicine, this is the biggest one to me. This saves lives, right? So let me go back. So AEDs, right? When I came into medicine, AEDs were in ICUs, they were in ambulances, right? ERs, of course, but they weren't anywhere else, right? They weren't in high schools yet, right? They weren't at malls or airports or anywhere, right? This case, okay, when Damar Hamlin went down on the field in Cincinnati, back there, what a shocking time that was. Wasn't it like New Year's Eve or something like that? Or, it was a holiday night. Everybody was watching the NFL. It was a great game. And there's this young player who by commotio cordis, we believe, right, was hit at the unbelievably wrong time in the wrong place, and down he goes. But what happened? There was an AED on the sidelines, but more than that, there were the trained personnel to save him. When he woke up, it was so remarkable. You know what he said? Who won the game? That means he didn't even see the white light of death coming at him. They got to him so fast, okay, so fast that he woke up and asked who won the game. And I relate this back, and once again, this is about victories in emergency medicine. In the year 2000, October, I was working in Barberton, Ohio, birthplace of Eric Parsegian and Bo Schembechler, by the way. Anyway, a player went down on the field, 15-year-old, right? And I was ER in Barberton, Ohio, working a regular old shift, okay? Didn't know anything about it until the squad call came in. So they worked the kid for an hour. Of course, he was a young person. My role in the case was to look at the paramedics, say, sorry, guys, you did a great job, and then go out and talk to the family, the coach, the students. And, you know, ER docs are funny, you know, it was just another night, you know, and we internalized those things. And I hadn't thought about it in years. But when that happened, I turned to Patty and I said, you know what, hon, I've had this case. Okay. So I went to work the next morning because I couldn't remember the kid's name and when exactly it was. It took me about, you know, 3 swipes of the Google machine, you know, to find it. His name was Josh Miller. Okay, and he was 15 years old. And I remembered that then. The most significant thing about it was the article underneath it. And this was state senator at the time, not U.S. senator. State Senator Sherrod Brown introduces the first ever AED Josh Miller Heart Act in the state of Ohio. That prompted high schools and other institutions to start putting AEDs out into the public. It also was the time, okay, when we started to screen kids for cardiac history, okay, in the physical exam. I did physical exams when I was a resident, you know, for high school students. We used to call them the turn your head and cough visits. You got 15. Anybody else do that when you're a resident? Of course, it's great money. It was cash. You know, walk out with a big stack of cash. But we didn't ask any other questions, right? There wasn't a recognition of Brugada or any of that type of stuff, you know. But now we do. But it was that victory, that Josh Miller Heart Act, at least in the state of Ohio, that prompted real change, and we saved people's lives. So how does this have to do anything with cannabis? And we'll get to it in a second. Where else were the victories, right? The understanding of chronic illness, right? And the care and understanding that goes along with that. That's resulted in people living longer lives, right? I got a slide to that. As people live longer lives, then they're going to have a certain amount of aging and suffering that goes along with it, right? And of course, cancer care as well. So our pediatric population, as Jenny just said, you know, we have, you know, kids and adults and everything. And listen, I'll be honest with you. And it'll just be a practical thing. You know, I was going to put my slides up and say, here's my slides. I want to answer questions because I don't think there's a lot of doctors out there. I always remember Jeff Block. First time I met him, I was at a cannabis conference. And I was quite proud of my practice and how many patients I had and everything, you know, and Jeff reminded me, you know, very kind of a little bit more quiet about it at this early stage of the practice. But I'll be honest with you now, I'm proud to say I have over 7,000 patients in the Florida Medical Cannabis Registry. With that, and with that comes experience. With that comes experience. And I know that there's so many questions that so many, you know, new practitioners and attorneys, you know, just paying, you know, attention have. And so I was almost going to put my slides up and say, let's just open it up for questions. But and I hope to have some time to answer questions. But it truly is been a remarkable ride. But where are the defeats? Okay, that's just I got to go this one. Space medicine. So when I was putting this talk together, literally, everybody else get the white journal still from emergency medicine. Anyway, on the front of mine, or it might have been ASAP journal, wherever it was, space medicine. There's a new fellowship, everybody. Okay, in emergency medicine. There was always Breitbart, toxicology, pediatrics. Then they added wilderness medicine, I think, in a certain point. I don't think that's a formal fellowship, but there's tracks. Now there is a formal fellowship program. There's 2 of them, and you can bet where they are. One is in University of Houston, okay, and the other's in LA, where SpaceX is. Emergency medicine residents can now apply for a 2-year fellowship in space medicine. There are 3 emergency medicine physicians in the Space Force, okay? It's not just that they're training the ER guy to pull a tooth, okay, on Mars, okay? They're doing research, okay, on how to create intravenous fluids in Mars. They're looking at the effect of weightlessness and other things. And you know what the largest amount of training that the ER guys have to go through to be into the program? Psychiatric. So they're going to be on Mars, okay, for 3 years. It's the only provider. And believe me, it's going to be pretty tough up there, right? There's going to be all kinds of things going on. But my thought is, where does cannabis come into play, right? You're going to need cannabinoids, of course, in your diet. I guarantee you someone should be looking at growing, obviously, hemp cannabinoids, you know, as we get into space. But I just thought that was really cool. And once again, another change in medicine to the extent that who would have ever thought about that, you know, back in 1981. So the victories are fantastic. And I think we all, you know them. We're the failures. Okay? As an emergency physician, I'll be honest with you. I am ashamed, and I mean ashamed of this country's gun policy. Pediatrics now, the #1 cause of death in the country is gun violence? Are you kidding me? As an emergency physician, that is an absolute tragedy. It's a disaster. It needs to stop, okay? And I don't want to get overly political up here, okay? But it's really a matter, and I had this idea 35 years ago, and the cat's out of the bag. Every handgun sold in the country should be ballistically fired and registered, and the owner given a card, okay? And anytime you buy ammo for that gun, you got to show the card. Look damn hard about that. If you own an assault rifle, you can own as many as you want, but keep them on your property. If you're so concerned about self-defense and who's ever coming after your guns, I don't care if you have 100 of them. And if you got 5 acres, you go out and shoot up anything you want, but keep them on your property. If it's under somebody's trench coat or the trunk of somebody's car, no assault rifle should be off anybody's property. And if you want it off your property, put it in a goddamn gun range and lock it up, and you can shoot anything up you want. I got no issues with it. But as an emergency position, we have to solve it. I don't know if anybody, and I know it's off top of cannabis, I'm sorry, but I don't know if anybody noticed the shooting in Hollywood last week or whatever, 9 victims. Nobody died. You know why? It was handguns. Listen, you can't look at the velocity of an AR and everything. Anyway, sorry about that. That's emergency position to me. Narcotics. People are fascinated when I tell them this stat. I started my emergency medicine practice in '84, big cities in Ohio, Cleveland, Mansfield, Akron. You know how many narcotic overdoses I saw in those first 16 years? 6 combined narcotic overdoses. You know why? Because the pill mills were not there yet. In the year 2000, everything changed, and they emanated from Florida, okay, coming up to Ohio. There was a $75 flight, okay, I got my time. There was a $75 flight from the Akron-Canton Airport down to Fort Lauderdale Airport. The addicts would literally get on in the morning, fly down, go to 4 clinics, split the 800 Percocets with the guy that paid for the flight when they got back. So we started to see this in Ohio. So in my last part of my career, 6 a month, 2 a day, same patient twice a day, right? And the last one, and you know, I'm gonna just buzz through this one. We all know this. It's giving over our practice to the freaking insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies. That's been a disaster. So I'm gonna buzz through these, you know. And once again, it just goes back to the child, you know, deaths. So why do we do it? What does it mean for the future of medicine, right? We have a mission. We have a mission to avoid the past mistakes. I want to go back to the Mar Hamlin lying on the field. I have 2 careers in medicine. The first was emergency medicine. This one is cannabis medicine. I want to make as big a difference in this second career as what we made in the first. And cannabis could do that. It's an ancient plant. Okay, so it's different than the AED, which is a modern invention, but it's an ancient plant with new understanding and new processing. And I want to make sure I get this in, and I will not run out of time before I do. Everybody needs a 30-second elevator speech, okay? Where you could talk to your representatives, your state senators, other doctors that you know. We all need this 30-second speech. And you know what mine is? Practitioners need to give, and that's why we're so important as doctors, because we're the only ones that truly have the white coat. When I put my white coat on, when I went up to Tallahassee, I felt great, because it separated me from the politicians. It separated me from the lobbyists, okay? We need to separate ourselves out as physicians. That's our moral obligation. We have to do what we know is right? And when we have a society We have a plant like cannabis that can offer that arrow in the quiver. Listen, it's not everything for everybody. One of the hallmarks of my clinic is we set the appropriate expectations, okay, for the patient when they come in. But the 30-second elevator speech is that politicians and doctors don't understand why we do what we do. They need to get off the image of the guy on the zigzag paper, so to speak, with the, waving of the smoke, because that's a 1969 image. That's THC alone, and that's the smoking of a joint. What we all know is that it's all of the cannabinoids, right? And I know I'm going to run out of time. This is my message to the hemp space. Keep your Delta 8. I want high quality CBD. I want CBC. I want CBG. I want CBN. I want all those other cannabinoids in guaranteed, pure, concentrated form. That's what the hemp space can give me. Okay. And that's something that's going to only happen if we insist on it. And that's as we go forward with legal adult use. So that's the first point. And the second point is the routes of administration. So people need to understand it's not just the smoking of anything or the inhaling of anything. It's patches, it's creams. My joke is I have suppositories for the politicians. But my point is that allows the patient to mix up their own safe witch's brew, so to speak. And I listened to Dr. Newton and I love him. He did a great job. And others that talk about particular milligram dosing, this, that, whatever. My philosophy has never been that. My philosophy is to educate my patients in the best usage of cannabis so that they can accomplish their goals. Every patient wants the same three things. They want to feel the best they can. They want to do it the safest, most natural way they can. And they want to be legal. Patients reduce their medicines on their motivation, not mine. I'm very simple, never two at a time, never any one abruptly. But patients reduce their medicines incredibly. And we're obligated as physicians. I want to get to the last. So we're surveying people, everybody, research. That's my thing. So we surveyed over 800 patients. There they are. Why are they sitting there like that? Because we know it's not the research that pharma wants. We know it's not the research that conventional doctors, healthcare providers want. We can't give it to them. I wish Mike McKenzie were here. He gives the best speech on this. Cannabis has too much heterogeneity to it. Too many terpenes, too many flavonoids, too many types. Each patient is different. If I go through a speech without talking about the Dr. Barry Gordon Doobie scale, then it wouldn't be a Dr. Barry Gordon speech. If there's ever anything ever named after me, it'll be that. Doobie 1's never done. Doobie 2's used to do. Doobie 3's set me free. They want off the legacy market. Doobie 4 is Willie Nelson and Tommy Chong. Give them more. But you have to meet your patients where they come to you from to accomplish what they're coming in from. And Dr. Jim over there, I want to address a lot of what you were talking to. Patients come to me because they want off the legacy market. Right? They want safe, right? There's too much carfentanil out there in supplies right now. So we're researching respect for the patient, respect for the plan. Two very simple concepts. Respect the patient enough to educate them because the plan always delivers. And that's my pet thought.
Thank you.
And I'd love to answer some questions.
Thank you, Barry.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have 5 minutes for questions.
You know what, Steve?
The question was, does he have a doobie slide?
I do. I'll post it somewhere. There's but listen, it's just important because patients come in. Listen, the craziest thing right now, everybody, and I'll stay off the soapbox too much, but patients are coming in using products already. So we have patients come in that have never used a cannabis product in their life, but they'll take their friend's gummy, right? Doobie 1s have never used cannabis in their life. They can't believe they're there. They come in because they're referred by their doctor office now. Everybody, if you're building a practice right now, my best advice to you, go to the doctors you know already. Go to the doctors that are close to your office. Let them know who you are, what you're doing, that you're offering another arrow out of the quiver with education and respect for the patient and the plan. That's how you build a practice. So Doobie 1s are sent to us by their doctor office. Doobie 2s used to use cannabis, had to give it up, job, kids, marriage, all the reasons people give it up. A lot of people move out of their hometown. It was their high school buddy that always sold them their weed, right?
Then you move to Florida at age 50. I'm not going to send people to the drugs, or to the drum circle, right? To buy cannabis. And I'm not going to pull my Ativan prescription out, and I'm not going to send them to the liquor store. So what you have to understand, Florida new practitioners are going to have a lot of snowbirds coming down that are getting safe, legal product already in Canada, in their home states with no qualifying condition. How do you do that? It's a social anxiety disorder, everybody. I see Todd back there, which is great because the OMU needs to know this. And the OMU knows this about my practice. It's a social anxiety disorder. If you're a cannabis consumer in the state of Florida, if you don't have a card, everybody, and if you're coming from Canada and you've gotten off alcohol and you're taking half, whatever then you want to continue with what you're using and where you're coming down from. It's illegal in Florida. Like I said, I'm not going to send people out to be safe. We need to be unsafe. We need to be safety officers, advocates, and educators for our patients. If you're an educator for your patient, I guarantee you, those guys are not going to have quarrels with you. Follow the rules, educate your patients, and you go to work and you come home with a passion every day. And I know, with Lori there, she's got out anesthesia, Bart, Marie, we all have come out from different specialties, but doing cannabis right is unbelievably gratifying. Do we four? That's Willie Nelson, Tommy Chong. Oh, threes just want to get off the legacy market. They don't want to buy black market product anymore. Threes are set me free. I want to be recognized as a cannabis consumer. I want the knife of anxiety out of my craw. I'm going to follow the rules. I'm not going to smoke in my car. I'm going to keep my products where they're supposed to be. Okay. But innately now, no one should be thrown in jail ever again. Okay. Or suffer from any recourse of negativity over the use of a plant. Okay. And that's just bad. And however we get there, 2 is a Willie Nelson, Tommy Chong. I will not put myself in that category. You got to be over 70. But the point is, those guys, listen, you know what the unique thing about them is? Whether patients come in wanting to be taught anything or not, or whether you feel they need or want to be taught anything or not, everybody can be taught something. The greatest thing in the world is when I have my Willie Nelson types come in. They fought in Vietnam. They fought for the right. They've had to go out to the garage for a certain part of their life because God forbid their kids would catch a cannabis smoke seriously using cannabis. All right. And they cry in the chairs over the ability to get legal. So then I tell them, listen, I got to teach you something. There's CBD and these other cannabinoids. They know nothing about it. All they know is the cannabis they've used is brown seeds rolling down the tray. It's a beautiful green, crystalline, leafy stuff. But when you teach about CBD, as I say to Willie, you ain't 18 no more, right? So they get the benefits of all that adult aging type of stuff that we've all heard over the past 3 days. If you respect the patient enough to teach them, right? And you respect the plant enough to know that it's not just THC.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for attending. Great questions. So we will reconvene at 11 o'clock.
11 o'clock sharp. I want to thank the panel, Dr. Berger, Dr. Jenny, Dr. Gordon, and Dr. Verma. I know she had to get out of here. So real quickly, Dr. Newton, you wanted to make a quick comment?
I have two. One I'm going to make, one this lovely lady over here is going to make, Marquita. So when I was presenting this morning on the cannabis and dosing, I didn't get a chance to, my last point was, I have a 2 to 5-25 rule. 2 to 5-25 rule. So if it's a strong cannabinoid, when I would give my recommendations, I would dose it at 2 to 5 milligrams. So that's delta 9, delta 10, delta 8, if it's in the plant. So that's the 2 to 5 dosing. The 25 is CBD and CBG. So that's your weak cannabinoids. So it's the 2 to 5-25 rule. So if it's a strong cannabinoid, dose at 2 to 5 milligrams per dose. If it's a weak cannabinoid like CBG or CBD, dose at 25 milligrams per dose. And then I have this lovely lady wants to share an announcement of an event that they have planned in Miami.
Thank you, guys. So I just want to let you guys know our mission is to promote sustainability and social equality. Our vision is a world where all students have access to free mental health resources. That's including a free therapist, a free mentor, a free personal development coach, a free financial literacy advisor. I think that would change the lives and decrease bullying, decrease school shootings and things of that nature. And we are having an event July 20th to the 22nd. We're featuring NFL, NBA players, celebrities, MLB players. They will be doing a panel speaking on mental health and their own experience with mental health. And then we will go into charity games where we're doing celebrity basketball games with the NBA players and celebrities, as well as we're going to get all former NFL players who's actually going to do a camp with the kids, and then they're going to do a flag football game. So I would like for you guys to definitely be a part of it because it's not just an event, it's more so of a movement. And this is global because everyone actually experienced mental health concerns. So thank you guys.
So that's National Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. As I'm walking over here to pass the mic back, I did want to mention two things that I shared with a couple of people this morning. One, has anybody read any studies that look at isolated terpenes? So there's a couple of studies which you can go on PubMed. One is that actually many studies on beta-alanine, which is a prescription drug for cancer in China, is also a terpene. The other one is limonene or limonene, depending on how you pronounce it. There are studies that show that that can shrink the size of breast tumors in high concentration in the order of 2 grams. So there's a few studies of both of those. And there's many other terpene studies, but I just want to encourage you. We're talking about dosing of cannabinoids in a lot of cases, but we forget about all the major benefits of the terpenes. So you may not see them in a study where it's terpenes from the cannabis plant, but there are studies on individual terpenes in isolation.
All right, thank you. Real quick, break next door, then we're coming back here. We're going to start at 11 o'clock sharp and wrap this program up. Thank you.